the only reason onto why I didn't talk about this episode completely when I talked about the show several years ago is mainly the fact that the first 3 to 4 minutes is what really caught my attention the most for how poorly executed this entire show was. And looking at the other half of this episode is just an excuse to have Nickelodeon make a horror/zombie episode involving tag characters, which I would have given them the benefit of the doubt considering that there was a mummy character in the first tag game. But this is Nickelodeon doing the tag cartoon we're talking about. In this episode, Tak has a loose tooth after eating one of his candy that he hid while the Chief and Japopa threw them away, and he's been warned by Japopa to not lose his magic to remove his tooth, otherwise there will be consequences. And after many attempts, including the last one that didn't work out, he uses his magic to remove his tooth. He buries his tooth at the tooth cemetery where the other tooths are buried, and during the night, the tooths have risen due to Tak's tooth's magic whizzing them from the grave. And because of this, the teeths that risen from the dead are looking for a gummy home, mainly people's mouths. When I watched this episode at the age of 9, of course I didn't know what was really going on. I only found the entertainment value of watching this episode white noise. But growing older and older, this episode's excuse on being a zombie episode isn't a bad idea. It's mainly the execution of this episode from beginning to end that really makes the zombie aspects, mainly the tooths, really underwhelming. The tooths being risen from the grave due to Tak's magic would have been something entertaining and something creative, but the problem is that one, it's mainly because of Tak's doing, which I'm gonna get to later, and that's not putting the blame on Tak, and the fact that Tak's magic manages to put tooths into walking zombies, or not really zombies, but mainly searching for a gummy home. I really found it difficult to find any creativity due to how they're just trying to make their version of the Poopa Noodle Village and the Juju material its own thing, but considering that the games did it much more better, they clearly don't even understand what the games did right and what they did wrong. Like, if Tak's magic can wizen people from the dead, and that also applies to bones, which tooths are also bones, I would really feel like that's going a little over-exaggerating to the point that just by seeing these tooths just looking for a gummy home for the sake of finding a gummy home, rather than just find a skeleton to rose from the dead of some sort. I know this usually goes nowhere, but that's basically the logic of how this episode is taking when it comes to the magic that really caused these tooths to search for a gummy home, and it just really makes me feel like that they only did this for the sake of having Tak lose his magic due to him not removing his tooth due to episode logic, or this show's logic. To point out, this episode is a Tak and Japopa episode when it comes to the second half, while the first half is mainly Tak removing his tooth. And when the tooths were about to surround Tak by taking over his mouth, Japopa decides to take one for the team since that he doesn't have any teeth, and allows all of the teeth to enter inside his jaw, which turns him into a zombie, which leads to the zombie aspect of this episode. I would have given this episode credit for having tooths taking control of a person's body by turning them into zombies, which for this episode's credit, it's rare for a person to have no teeth whatsoever, which is why Jaboba has been eating soft pudding. But with the only first episodes where the characters have a little development, and I mean a little, I mean they're not dumbed down and not doing stupid decisions, which isn't saying much because they still do stupid decisions with cringe humor. I'm not really adjusting with the whole relationship between Tak and Jaboba in this, even though they change Jaboba's personality or character traits as an uncle instead of how he was in the games. Granted, I would have accepted that, but considering that Jaboba doesn't do much other than being a zombie, and the only way for the teeth to come out of him is to have him eat candy, he doesn't remember what really happened when it comes to what Tak told him about him apologizing to everything that happened, mainly from this episode. The thing is that when they just do this whole consequence thing by having you doing the wrong thing, all the while having an ending like this, it just makes the moral really less meaningful and just really makes Jaboba difficult to being taken seriously as a more serious character in comparison to Tak in the show. While he was serious in the games, but also Tak as well. I just feel like that these characters having different character traits than how they were in the games, and this leads to the conclusion on them not remembering anything, all the while just doing random stuff in the following episodes. It just makes this whole zombie situation a waste of thought when it comes to the Tooth's risen from the grave, which they just underestimate on how the dynamic between Tak and Jaboba, mainly from the second game, really works when it comes to their relationship. And as long as they actually knew how to handle the characters a lot more properly than how they were executed, maybe I would have easily forgiven nearly all the decisions in this episode. But the decision that I'm not going to be on board with no matter what is obviously Tak's tooth not being removed from Tak, despite the third attempt of throwing the boulder off of a cliff and it's still attached to him, which makes no sense. Even though that in the prequel special, it's described that Tak is half Juju, half human or something, but if this is the excuse on why they did this decision in the first place, then I'm pretty sure that they would have done anything aside from the tooth being attached to a cord that is attached to Tak, and this leads to Locke thinking that it's a pink rope when he was about to do rock climbing, which is still difficult to watch, judging of how they're trying way too hard to have Tak trying to use his magic to remove it, only to have the odds against him, because as far as I'm concerned, this is way too difficult for me to believe, especially since when Tak said life nerve, which I don't know well Nickelodeon came with that term when they were making this episode, but I can guarantee you that it just doesn't make any sense in this when it comes to his religion on being half Juju and half human. And since they made Tak incredibly stupid in this show, they refuse to make him defend himself when it comes to the many attempts that he tries to remove his tooth and only having magic being the solution. This is why I don't blame Tak completely by using his magic, because that last third attempt really sums up everything that they just don't care on just making the character smart in order to have an interesting direction, all the while being supportive towards each other, because the supportiveness in this show is just non-existent, and when there is, they're not putting any effort by making the characters taken seriously. Like, if you don't take the characters seriously and just use this show for the sake of rising up your IP due to the success of the video games, It just proves that Nickelodeon has no talent by continuing an IP from the success of the predecessors. I know it may be exaggerating when it comes to other IPs being popular. Well, a new studio will take will be able to pick up the old company left off, and I'm sure it happens in other places, but whenever I look at Nickelodeon, this show, along with other shows that ended up being worse when it comes to new direction, new writers, and new creative differences that really affected the product itself, Nickelodeon is really untalented on continuing IPs in order to make them successful in comparison to what made them good in the first place. This episode isn't good, obviously, and I would have done a Cartoon Crisis 3 video out of it if we wouldn't be doing Halloween Mania 2. This episode just mostly gets worse to sit through, mainly the fact that the first half of the episode is just dreadful due to the execution of refusing to give Tak a break, while the second half would have had potential, but due to poor execution and direction, there was nothing good that could come out of this episode if you're watching this episode and show for the first time. It's no surprise that this episode gets a 3 out of 10, but when it comes to this cartoon and the prequel special that I talked about briefly in this, I decided that next month I'm going to be reviewing Destiny's Semester for its 16th anniversary, if anyone actually cared about that, but for me personally, that's honestly the biggest opportunity to talk about that episode, all the while expressing on how that being the prequel special really makes all this a waste of thought. Not an afterthought, a waste of thought, which really says a lot.